Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive deep into a story of resilience and courage?
I am.
Great. Because today, we're exploring the struggles of some incredible elder African leaders against colonialism.
It's a fight for freedom.
That's exactly it. But not just on battlefields. We're talking about the hearts and minds of people.
Absolutely. It was about reclaiming identity.
Yeah, and dignity, too, right?
You got it. In the face of a system that was literally designed to erase them.
To really get this, we need to understand what life under colonial rule was actually like.
It wasn't just about political control.
There was more.
Oh, yeah. Think economic exploitation, the dismantling of their traditions, even replacing their entire way of life.
So was resistance even a choice?
Not really. Imagine having your history, your traditions, even your language systematically undermined.
It sounds like a fight for survival almost.
You hit the nail on the head. It wasn't just about political freedom. It was deeply personal for many.
Powerful stuff. And out of this struggle came some really extraordinary leaders. Kwame Nkrumah, for example.
Nkrumah, what a visionary. He dreamt of a united Africa, freed from colonial rule, a concept known as Pan-Africanism.
It sounds radical for the time.
It was, but it resonated with those who yearned for a continent that could stand on its own.
It's incredible he started as an activist, organizing and advocating for change.
Then he led Ghana to independence.
From activist to leader, that journey tells us a lot about the man.
It speaks to his commitment, that's for sure, and his ability to inspire.
He understood the power of grassroots movements.
And never lost sight of it. Nkrumah's story challenges what leadership really means. It's about action.
Impact.
Right. And Nkrumah wasn't alone. Early protests and movements were happening all over Africa.
I bet there are stories we haven't even heard of.
Absolutely. One that comes to mind is the Abo Women's Riot in Nigeria in 1929.
The Abo Women's Riot.
Yeah. Thousands of women protested British policies that were disrupting their lives.
So they were fighting back against the system.
They were enraged by new taxes.
Taxes.
They saw them as unfair. And what's really impressive, they used traditional forms of protest.
Like,
Song, dance, sit-ins to make their voices heard.
that's amazing. Do you think their actions had a wider impact?
Oh, definitely. The Abo Women's Riot was a powerful demonstration of women's strength.
And their role in resisting colonial rule.
Exactly. It showed that resistance wasn't limited to just the political elite.
It was happening in everyday life.
It also inspired other women across Africa to fight for their rights.
That's amazing, showing that revolutions can start in unexpected places.
Right.
And everyday people can become leaders.
Absolutely, when they have a cause to fight for.
Speaking of fighting, the Mau uprising in Kenya.
Oh yes, the Mau Mau uprising.
I know the name, but I'm not so clear on the details.
Imagine a guerrilla war waged mostly by the Kikuyu people against the British Empire.
That's a David and Goliath situation.
You could say that.
So who led this incredibly risky rebellion?
Jomo Kenyatta was at the forefront.
Kenyatta.
He became Kenya's first president.
Wow, from rebellion to leading the nation.
He was a powerful advocate for self-rule and also for land reform. He knew that true freedom meant control over their resources.
Makes sense. He was rallying Kenyans to resist, not just with weapons, but with a vision for their future.
That's right.
It must have taken incredible bravery to be involved.
They knew the brutal response that was coming.
And it did, right.
The sacrifices made by the Kenyan people during this time are difficult to comprehend.
What did the British do?
Their response was ruthless. Detention camps, horrific conditions, torture, forced labor.
Oh my gosh. It's hard to even imagine facing that level of brutality.
It was truly a dark period. It was meant to crush the rebellion through fear and violence.
Did any stories of resilience or defiance stand out to you?
So many, but the story of Field Marshal Dedan Kimathi, a Mau Mau leader, is inspiring.
Kimathi.
Yeah. He evaded capture for years, leading from the forests of Mount Kenya.
Wow.
He became a symbol of defiance.
I can see why, fighting against oppression and being hunted by an empire.
It really shows the strength of the human spirit.
It does.
But Kimathi's story, as remarkable as it is, it's important to remember the Mau Mau uprising was a collective effort.
You're right. Thousands of Kenyans risked their lives, enduring hardship, all for liberation.
And their commitment ultimately forced the world to acknowledge Kenya's fight.
So their suffering wasn't in vain.
Not at all. They paved the way for Kenya's freedom in 1963.
With Kenyatta as president.
From leading a rebellion to leading a nation, it's a testament to his leadership.
And the resilience of the Kenyan people.
They refused to be broken. It's a powerful reminder. Even facing huge odds, hope and determination can win. But the fight for freedom in Africa, it wasn't always straightforward.
Right. The story of Patrice Lumumba and the Congo is much more tragic.
A leader who fought for Congolese independence but shrouded in mystery.
And tragedy.
Lumumba's story, both captivating and heartbreaking, he was a brilliant orator, a passionate advocate for unity.
And self-determination.
He had this ability to connect with people, to inspire them. In 1960, when Congo gained independence, Lumumba became its first prime minister.
What was his vision for Congo?
One of his famous quotes captures it. "We are going to show the world what black men can do when they are working in freedom."
Powerful words. He had high hopes for his nation. Was there anything Lumumba could have done differently?
It's a question historians still debate. Lumumba was in a situation internal divisions, Cold War tensions, made governing nearly impossible.
That's a lot of challenges.
A lot. He was a staunch Pan-Africanist advocating for a united Congo, free from outside interference.
The united Congo.
But this put him at odds with various factions.
So his vision, while inspiring, might have also made him a target.
Yeah. And sadly, his vision was met with violence. He was ousted from power, then imprisoned,
Ding dong.
and ultimately assassinated in 1961.
It's always tragic when a leader who represents so much hope is silenced. If outside forces hadn't interfered, could things have been different?
We can't know for sure. Many argue that his assassination was a pivotal moment, not just for Congo, but for all of Africa.
In what way?
Lumumba became a martyr for the Pan-African movement, a symbol of the struggle against neocolonialism. His death, it highlighted the reality that independence didn't guarantee true freedom.
It's a reminder that the fight for self-determination is a constant process.
And there are always forces trying to undermine it. But despite the tragedy, Lumumba's legacy continues.
So.
He inspires people across Africa and beyond, reminding us about justice, equality, and true self-determination.
His story, although tragic, is powerful. A testament to the human spirit in the face of oppression.
It is.
It reminds us that the fight for freedom is rarely easy, and sometimes even the most visionary leaders face impossible obstacles. Speaking of leaders who faced obstacles, Nelson Mandela.
Mandela, a symbol of the fight against apartheid. What's fascinating is his journey started long before his imprisonment.
He was involved in activism early on.
Deeply involved. He joined the African National Congress, the ANC, advocated for equal rights for Black South Africans.
So he was a dedicated activist from the get-go. What were some of the key moments?
The Defiance Campaign of 1952 was a defining moment, a series of nonviolent protests against unjust laws.
I see. A movement against injustice.
Mandela was instrumental in organizing and mobilizing people. It showed his leadership skills and his commitment to peaceful resistance. But the government's response, harsh. Thousands were arrested, including Mandela.
So the peaceful protests were met with force.
And this experience really cemented his belief that more radical action was needed.
He dismantled apartheid.
Exactly. This led him to co-found Umkhonto we Sizwe,
Umkhonto we Sizwe.
the armed wing of the ANC.
So they took up arms.
They carried out acts of sabotage against government installations, trying to disrupt the apartheid regime without hurting civilians.
That must have been controversial.
It was, even within the ANC. But Mandela argued it was necessary, a response to the state's violence.
It's a complex ethical situation. Peaceful resistance, but recognizing the need for forceful action against a brutal regime.
It makes you think. Even the most iconic leaders have to make tough choices in their pursuit of justice.
It does.
But it's important to note, Mandela always maintained that violence should be a last resort.
Only when all else fails.
Exactly. And this commitment contributed to his widespread respect, even among those who didn't agree with his tactics.
His core values never wavered.
And this unwavering commitment led to his arrest in 1964, along with other ANC leaders.
Charged with.
Sabotage and other crimes. Mandela was sentenced to life in prison.
And that's when he became a global icon, a symbol of the fight against apartheid.
Absolutely. While imprisoned, Mandela became a powerful symbol. His image everywhere. Posters, murals, T-shirts all over the world.
What did the international community do to support the movement during Mandela's imprisonment?
The cultural boycott of South Africa was huge. Artists, musicians, athletes, they refused to perform there. It sent a clear message.
It was a powerful statement.
And there were massive demonstrations, fundraising concerts, constant pressure on governments to impose sanctions.
So a global movement putting pressure on the South African regime.
Yes, and the divestment movement gained momentum too.
Divestment.
Universities, pension funds, even entire cities sold off their investments in South African companies.
It's amazing how people from around the world united to demand justice.
A truly global movement fueled by outrage at the injustice of apartheid.
Inspired by Mandela's unwavering spirit.
That's right.
And finally, in 1990, after 27 years, Mandela was released. Can you imagine the weight of expectation on him?
It's hard to fathom. But despite everything, Mandela emerged, his spirit unbroken, his commitment to justice as strong as ever.
And what's truly remarkable is his approach. He didn't seek revenge.
He called for unity, forgiveness, and reconciliation.
It's incredible. After so much suffering, he still advocated for peace and understanding.
It is. One of his most significant acts was establishing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
What was that?
It was a platform for victims of apartheid to share their story,
Giving them a voice.
acknowledging their pain. And at the same time, it allowed perpetrators to confess their crimes and seek amnesty.
So it was a way to promote healing and move forward.
Exactly. It was about accountability and healing.
It sounds like a difficult balance, justice with unity.
Mandela's approach had critics. Some felt it was too lenient on the perpetrators.
And others.
Others believed it was essential for South Africa to move forward.
To heal as a nation.
Regardless, Mandela's commitment to peace and forgiveness left a mark on South Africa and the world.
It's an inspiring story.
It highlights the fight against oppression, but also forgiveness, resilience, and the complexity of leadership.
It does. While Mandela is celebrated as a hero, it's important to remember the struggle against apartheid was a collective effort.
And women played crucial roles, often overlooked in the history books.
That's a good point. We can't talk about African liberation without recognizing the women who fought for freedom and equality.
Right. Their stories are intertwined with the broader movements we've talked about.
Absolutely.
From organizing protests to providing support, women were essential to these movements. They faced huge risks, often the same brutality.
But their contributions often get minimized.
Or forgotten completely.
Who are some of the women whose stories we should know?
Ya Asantewaa, Queen Mother of the Ashanti Empire, is one.
The Ashanti Empire, where's that?
In what's now Ghana. In the early 1900s, the British tried to seize the Golden Stool,
The Golden Stool.
a sacred symbol of Ashanti sovereignty. Ya Asantewaa, she refused to back down.
She stood up to them.
She did. She
Yeah.
rallied her people, leading the Ashanti Rebellion.
Wow. Challenging the British Empire. That takes guts.
She was a powerful leader, a symbol of female strength and resistance. Her story is a reminder that women have always been on the front lines, fighting for freedom and self-determination.
So inspiring. A true pioneer.
And her story highlights another point about women's involvement. They weren't just fighting colonial rule, they were also challenging patriarchal structures within their own societies.
So they were fighting on multiple fronts. Against oppression from outside forces and within their own communities.
That's exactly right.
Are there other women who played key roles we should know about?
Many. But Winnie Mandela comes to mind.
Nelson Mandela's wife.
Yes. While he was in prison, she became a strong voice in the anti-apartheid movement.
What happened to her?
She faced constant harassment, detention, even banishment.
By the South African government.
That's right. But despite that, she never wavered. She became a symbol of strength and defiance herself.
These women were navigating a male-dominated world, making significant contributions to the fight for freedom and equality.
They were true trailblazers. Their stories are so important to the ongoing struggle for women's rights.
It's all connected.
It is. Colonialism often made existing gender inequalities worse, denying women education, economic opportunities, political power.
So the fight against colonialism was also a fight for women's liberation.
In many ways, yes.
It's a powerful reminder that the pursuit of freedom has many layers. It's about dismantling all forms of oppression, not just colonial rule,
That's it.
but also patriarchal structures and systemic inequalities.
Exactly. And these struggles are interconnected. You can't address one without the others. They're all part of the same fight.
The fight for a more just and equitable world,
Precisely.
a fight that continues. Speaking of broader movements, let's talk about Pan-Africanism. We've touched on it, but it deserves a closer look.
It's a powerful idea.
Can you give us a better understanding of what it represents, especially in the context of African liberation?
Pan-Africanism At its core, it's the belief in the unity and solidarity of people of African descent.
Worldwide.
Yes, worldwide. It's a movement that goes beyond national borders, advocating for self-determination and liberation for all African people.
It's about recognizing the shared history of struggle.
Yes, and the need for collective action to overcome these challenges.
It's amazing how this idea of a united Africa, free from colonial rule, connected with so many people, is like a direct response to the things colonialism imposed.
It was a powerful vision. Figures like Kwame Nkrumah, who we discussed earlier, and Marcus Garvey played key roles in promoting Pan-Africanism globally.
Who was Marcus Garvey?
He was a Jamaican activist who advocated for Black empowerment and a return to Africa.
Interesting.
Their ideas transcended borders, connecting people of African descent through a shared history and the goal of liberation.
So how did this global movement translate into real change within Africa itself,
Yeah.
especially after colonialism?
Pan-Africanist ideals had a huge impact on the political scene in Africa.
Such as?
They inspired the formation of organizations like the Organization of African Unity, later the African Union, which aimed to promote cooperation and unity.
It was a way to overcome the divisions of the past,
Exactly, and forge a new path based on unity and a shared purpose.
creating a framework for a more integrated and self-reliant Africa.
Exactly, one that could resist outside pressures. And this vision, it went beyond politics. Pan-Africanism inspired cultural exchanges, artistic collaborations, and economic partnerships across the continent.
So it was about fostering a shared identity and celebrating African heritage?
And promoting intra-African trade and development.
Incredible. So even though colonialism ended, the fight for a united Africa continues.
It does. And the challenges are many: poverty, conflict, corruption, and neocolonial influences. But the spirit of Pan-Africanism, the belief in unity and collective action, it remains a driving force for positive change.
It's inspiring how that vision continues to motivate people. Can you give us an example of something happening today that embodies this spirit?
The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is a great example.
What does that do?
It came into effect in 2021, aiming to create a single market for goods and services across Africa,
One big market.
boosting trade within Africa and reducing reliance on external markets.
That's a huge undertaking.
It's a big step towards realizing the economic potential of a unified Africa.
A vision aligned with the goals of Pan-Africanism.
Precisely. It's just one example of how the ideals of Pan-Africanism are still shaping the continent. From initiatives for peace and conflict resolution to collaborations in science and technology and education, the spirit of unity and progress is thriving.
It sounds like a real game changer. Promoting cooperation and integration, it could help lift people out of poverty and strengthen Africa's global economic position.
Absolutely.
What can we learn from all these stories? From the fight against colonial rule to the ongoing journey for a free and united Africa.
These leaders, the famous ones and those we might not know as well, they've shown us that the pursuit of justice and equality is a long and difficult journey.
And it's not over.
It requires courage, resilience, and a willingness to challenge what's accepted as normal. They've taught us about the power of unity, solidarity, and collective action in overcoming obstacles.
Their stories are powerful.
They remind us that we all have a part to play in creating a more just and equitable world, whether through activism, advocacy, education, or even just by having meaningful conversations. We can all make a difference.
By learning from the past, understanding these complex struggles, and honoring those who fought for freedom, we can build a future where everyone has a chance to thrive.
That's the goal.
It's a vision worth striving for. Thank you for taking us on this deep dive into such a complex and important chapter in history.
It's been my pleasure. These stories need to be told.
To our listeners, if you're interested in learning more about any of this, we recommend checking out mentioned specific books, documentaries, or resources related to the topic. Let's keep the conversation going and continue to learn from the past as we work toward a better future. It's amazing how this idea resonated with so many people, this united Africa, free from colonial rule. It's almost like a direct response to everything colonialism forced on them.
A powerful vision, and figures like Kwame Nkrumah, who we talked about, and Marcus Garvey, they were really important in promoting Pan-Africanism globally.
Garvey, I don't think we've touched on him yet.
He was a Jamaican activist.
Right. Yeah.
He advocated for Black empowerment and a return to Africa.
So their ideas, they went beyond just one country.
Absolutely. Connecting people of African descent all over the world. A shared history,
Yeah, and a common goal.
Liberation.
How did this global movement actually create change within Africa, especially after colonialism?
Pan-Africanist ideals, They had a huge impact on African politics.
In what way?
They influenced the creation of organizations like the Organization of African Unity, which later became the African Union.
What did they do?
They aimed to promote cooperation and unity among African nations.
It was about moving past the divisions created by colonialism.
Right. Forging a new path, unity and shared purpose.
They're building a more integrated Africa,
Self-reliant.
one that could resist outside pressure.
Exactly. And this vision, it went beyond politics.
How so?
Think cultural exchanges, artistic collaborations, economic partnerships.
Across the continent.
It was all about fostering a shared identity, celebrating their heritage.
And promoting trade and development within Africa. It sounds like, even though colonialism ended, there's still work to be done.
Oh, absolutely. The challenges are still there.
Like what?
Poverty, conflict, corruption, those neo-colonial influences. But the spirit of Pan-Africanism, that belief in unity and collective action, that's still a driving force for change.
It's inspiring to see that vision still motivating people. Are there any modern-day examples of this Pan-African spirit?
The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is a great example.
Tell me more about that.
It started in 2021. The goal is to create a single market for goods and services across Africa.
That's ambitious.
It is. The hope is to boost trade within Africa and reduce reliance on those external markets.
So it's a step towards a more economically unified Africa.
And it's aligned with those Pan-Africanist goals.
It sounds like a major step forward. Cooperation and integration could really make a difference in fighting poverty and strengthening Africa's place in the global economy.
I think so.
So after all these stories, the struggles against colonialism, the ongoing fight for a truly free and united Africa, what have we learned?
These leaders, whether they're well-known or not, they've shown us that the pursuit of justice and equality, well, it's a long and difficult journey.
It takes a lot of strength.
Courage, resilience, and being willing to challenge the way things are. They've shown us how powerful unity, solidarity, and collective action can be.
To overcome any obstacle.
Exactly. Their stories really emphasize that we all have a role to play in making the world a more just and equitable place.
We can all contribute.
Whether it's through activism, advocacy, education, or just having those tough conversations, we can all push for positive change.
By learning from the past, understanding these struggles, and honoring those who fought so hard, we can create a future where everyone has a chance to thrive. It's something worth fighting for. Thank you so much for guiding us through this incredibly complex and important part of history.
It's been a pleasure. These are stories that need to be shared.
And for our listeners, if you want to explore any of these topics further, we encourage you to check out mentioned specific books, documentaries, or resources related to the topic. Let's keep learning from the past and work together for a brighter future.